Hello, Fort friends, new and old alike. Today we have an extra special treat for you. We were recently offered the privilege to sit down and talk with the developer of Particle Hearts, a wonderful gentleman who spent 15 plus years in Triple A development, who recently went indie to create a game of his own. This interview details that journey and gives us a special look into the challenges faced along his development path. It's full of honesty, insights, and some fantastic advice for those looking to start this journey themselves. I have chaptered the video by each question asked, so feel free to poke around and explore what you're most interested in learning about. A huge thanks to Jess for taking the time to sit down and chat about this. And don't forget to check out his game Particle Hearts on Steam. The link is in the description. If you're interested in sitting down with us for an interview, feel free to send an email our way, as we'd love to make this a more regular occurrence on the channel. For now, though, please enjoy. All right. We'll go ahead and start with our introduction. And I am actually very curious, what led you to a career in the gaming industry?
Yeah, I was an art kid, so I was spending my recesses in the corner with a drawing notepad, drawing doodles and whatnot. My parents were gym teachers, which oddly enough is not super art related. So they didn't allow, they said no video games in the house when I was growing up. So I wasn't really exposed to video games unless it was raining outside. Then we were allowed to go play with the neighbors indoors who had a Nintendo, and so I could go over there and play Nintendo. So that was kind of like my only exposure early on in life. But I would always beg and ask them, like, hey, can I just buy a video game system? And in 8th grade, I cracked them, and they let me buy a Nintendo 64 and Turok Dinosaur Hunter, if anybody remembers that one.
Yeah.
And it was $70. I'll remind people too that I paid in 1997 or something. I paid $70 for Turok, and so yeah, I bought my first gaming system and just kind of fell in love with it. It seemed to be this odd match of art and technology that I found really captivating for some reason. And then by high school, I kind of made up my mind. I thought, you know what? I want to make a career out of video games. I had no idea how to do that. So I actually started in graphic design, thinking that, okay, it's art, it's computers, you put the two together and maybe a video game pops out, which wasn't the case. But so I spent a couple years in college studying graphic design, realized that was not the path to video games. So I transferred to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and I got a degree in computer animation. And what was great about that program was I was kind of allowed to be a generalist. And, so much of the industry was, you're a specialist, right? You study to be an animator, you study to be a modeler. But I was able to kind of get this very generalist schooling. And that's something that kind of carried with me throughout my career. And we could talk about later if you want. But got my degree and then applied to basically every video game company under the sun. And this was back in the days where you just couldn't apply online. You had to make a DVD and a demo reel and send it to all these companies and mail it to all these companies. So I did that, and before I had any offers, I jumped in the family van, which my parents were gracious enough to let me take, and I drove to California, figuring that a lot of the industry was in California, so that's where I should be, is California.
Naturally, yeah.
Yeah, I had very little money. I didn't have a computer, which at this day sounds bizarre to me. What were you doing moving to California? No money, no computer, wanting to work in video games on computers. It didn't make sense, right? and I don't think I'll ever be able to kind of make sense of it in my head, but at the time that was just what I needed to do to work in video games. Um, one of those applications landed. I was lucky enough to get a gig at Sony in San Diego. They have a cinematics team down there that work on um, cinematics for their AAA games. So we were doing cinematics for games in the SOCOM series, the Killzone series, Lair. If anybody remembers
Mm,
Lair, that was
that's
a
exciting.
PS3 launch title. It didn't do very well, but it was a
Yeah.
big deal for us back in the day. Um, and again, so there I was a generalist. They wanted me to be a generalist, so I spent a lot of time just bouncing around between departments. Um, they would need modeling done for this project, so I would jump over here and model for a bit, and then they would need rigging done for this project, and so I'd jump over there. Um, I did camera work and texture work and all these things, and it was really cool to be able to just kind of stay a generalist. Which, as I kind of progressed in my career, realized how kind of rare that that kind of is. Um,
Yeah.
so then after,
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, ironically, in my school, a lot of my teachers constantly hammered in being a generalist. I actually have, compositing experience, animation
Hmm.
experience, texturing details. I specialized in environment and character art, but then the first 18 months of the degree, you just generalize in everything.
Hmm.
And I had the chance to speak with someone at Ubisoft, and he said that's going to be your best friend because being a
Hmm.
generalist you'll get a job so much faster as a generalist than somebody that can only do character art or only do environment or rigging or animation. So it's kind of cool
Yeah,
that
that's. I think
that
that's
still
great
applies.
advice. I think anytime you know more about the overall process from a high level, the better you are at being able um, to jump in there and understand the decisions that you're making will have a ripple effect onto somebody else. And if you can understand what those what those consequences are for your decisions, or what the benefits are for doing things a certain way, the more you understand the process, I think just the more informed and better you are. um, that comes, I don't want to sit here and toot our own horn, toot my own horn here, though. That does come at the risk of not being specialized and amazing at what you're doing, right? Because you're
Right.
you're
Yeah.
spreading yourself out a little bit. Now I was kind of lucky enough to be put in positions where I could be a generalist. But in AAA, for example, especially these days, I think I think it is becoming more and more specialized. And the people that are specialized are brilliant, right? They're amazing at what
Right.
they do. Um, but I think that I hope there's always a spot for us generalists, because I think we can bring a lot to the table, and I think that is a special skill set that not everybody is interested in having or does have. So
Or needs. Yeah.
um, or needs, yeah. So I hope we're in the right boat. I
Agreed.
hope we I hope we chose wisely. We'll see. Um,
I imagine, I know this isn't really like on the question list, but I imagine being a generalist probably aided you in developing your own game, though.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think if I had been a specialist, I don't know if I would have had the courage to make the jump,
Right.
because I think I would have been daunted by all of the other things that I knew I had to learn, or knew I wasn't good at. Um, and don't get me wrong, there's already a handful of things that you're not going to be good at, that you don't know how to do when you're making your own game.
Yeah.
There's going to be a laundry list of those things. And so, um, but the shorter that list is, the better, right? The more comfortable you feel taking that leap. So,
Absolutely.
uh, so yeah, I totally agree. I think being a generalist is almost a necessity if you want to jump into indie game development. Um, so after Sony, I applied at Treyarch, who at the time were doing Call of Duty, they were working on Spider-Man, and unknown to me, they were also working on a James Bond game. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big Bond fan. Um, and so I interviewed with the Call of Duty guys, and they're like, you know what, we got this other project we're working on. Why don't you go interview with them? And so they took me to the other side of the building and I sat down and they started talking about the project. And they said, well, why don't we show you a little something that we're working on? And and the next thing I know, I'm looking at James Bond on the screen and I'm going, okay, I want to work on this game. Can you please hire me? Um, and so I left that interview hoping that the James Bond team would have a need for me, and luckily they did. And I think that's if I had to pick one of the biggest kind of breakthroughs in my career, that would have been one.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And yeah, to work on a franchise that you just really love. Taking you back to like the my first Nintendo 64 games. Turok was number one, and I think the second game I bought was GoldenEye, and GoldenEye was a game changer for me. It's still my favorite game of all time. I can't tell you how many hours I spent in that game. Um, but and that kind of kicked off my whole love for that series, and so to be able to work on that series was really kind of cool and special for me. Um, and they needed somebody just to do destruction, which wasn't anything that I had done before, but it required a generalist mentality. You needed to take pristine models and break them up. So there was some modeling components to that. You had to be able to UV and do texture work on those broken up assets. You then had to animate and do simulations on these for these destruction moments. You had to rig it and then get it in the game and test it and work with the particle effects team to make sure that the smoke and the fire and everything looked good. And so it was kind of this perfect generalist fit for me, and ended up being a great project for me. It didn't do amazing for the studio, which is why they only made one.
Right.
But luckily, Call of Duty was taking off at that point pretty seriously, and so they merged all the teams. So they took the Spider-Man team and the Bond team, and they merged them into Call of Duty, and they put all their eggs in that basket. And that kind of defined the next phase of my career there, working on Call of Duty games, creating a new department within the studio. We weren't really an effects team. We weren't really the animation team. We were kind of something in the middle. We called ourselves the effects anim team, which, is just basically taking two words and shoving them together. But
Yeah.
so yeah, just leading that team for the next, I don't know, 5, 6 Call of Duty games, and just trying to make explosions and destruction bigger and better every game. You can imagine it's Call of Duty, so there's a lot
Yep.
of
Yep.
opportunity for that, right?
You gotta
Um,
Michael Bay it.
yeah, we Michael Bayed the crap out of it, and we expanded into. I like to say that we animated anything in the environment that wasn't a character. So vehicles, tarps, ropes, foliage, destruction. I've obviously mentioned. Um, Working on zombies, the zombie team would come to you every week with something new and bizarre to animate. Um,
Yeah,
so
I
there
can
was just
imagine.
yeah, so there was just kind of this endless flow of new things to animate, and it was just kind of this perfect fit for a generalist. So, um, and then during my final couple of years at Treyarch, I took on more design roles. So I was designing zombie maps and modes for that team, um, which was a lot of fun and a change of pace, right, from what I'd kind of previously been doing. Um, but that whole stretch at Treyarch was 15 years. And then at that point, I decided time for a change. I'm going indie.
And I am genuinely curious what kind of led to that decision. What was there like a moment or just a point? Was it more of a burnout thing?
I mean, there definitely comes a moment, right? I'm sitting there going, people would kill to work on this series. You know, should I leave this? And don't get me wrong, I loved working in AAA. It gave me the opportunity to do what I'm doing now and to go indie just financially, right? We were lucky to have such a lucrative franchise that people loved and spent money on. And so, you know, me leaving AAA is in no way me saying like I didn't like it or I was done with it or, you know, it was bad or whatever, because that was definitely not the case. But there came a time where I wanted to be kind of creatively challenged again.
Right.
And
I mean, doing the same thing for 15 years, I imagine it does get redundant, even if it is a wonderful job and the dream.
Yeah, there is a redundancy to it. Yeah. And you can be creative, but you have to kind of be creative in your own lane.
Right.
And I also kind of wanted to be more hands-on. So, you know, the higher up the ladder you get, the more kind of managerial you become, leading teams and more meetings and, you know, all the things that come with corporate America.
Of course.
And
Naturally.
I wanted to return to form in a little bit, in a way, right? And just become more hands-on again. I wanted to make art again. I think I am an artist at heart, and it's hard to take that out of me. And so I felt like leaving AAA and going indie would give me an opportunity to explore some creative things that I was thinking about, and just be a little more in charge of my own destiny, I think.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was not an easy choice to make. There was a bunch of self-doubt that went into that choice. You know, you're most assuredly taking a pay cut, which, you know, factors into a lot of things.
Especially
but really
in California.
Yeah, it's not cheap here. But at the end of the day, you know, they say when you know, and I just you get to that point where I just knew, like, I have to do this. I have to take a risk and make a bet on myself and give this a go. So yeah, that was kind of the thought process, leaving AAA.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Mhm.
I want to jump to how did you transition? Because I feel like that is the most relevant to follow what you just said. How did you handle the transition first off, and then like what were the steps you took to ensure a smooth transition ultimately?
Sure. Yeah, it started with kind of saving money, knowing that I was going from a good paycheck to no paycheck. So, and again, luckily, I was in a position that allowed me to save money and kind of prepare for making that transition. So I paid off my mortgage. I trimmed all the expenses that I could get out of my life. You know, I'm on the cheapest Netflix plan with ads and, you know,
Yeah.
anything I could cut out, I was cutting out.
Eating ramen noodles, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. Hot Pockets are kind of my brand, but
There you go.
ramen
Whatever
and Hot
works.
Pocket. Yeah. But yeah, it really started there financially. Is just taking a look at my expenses, seeing what I could get rid of, and being at least aware of how much money my life costs, and you know, being able to do some very simple math, just going, okay, if my life costs this much and I want to make a game and it's going to take this much time. You can just kind of start to do the math and figure out a plan. So that was kind of what I did financially to get started.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes the most sense. If you're gonna go to no paycheck, you have to make sure you got at least 6 months to a year in the bank account.
Yeah, for me it was going to be 2 years,
Even better.
and just because I know that things take longer than you expect them to, right? Nothing in video games takes the amount of time that you think. They always say double it, and a lot of times I say, yeah, maybe triple it.
Yeah.
Um,
I've seen enough
but
delays in the 3
yep,
years I've been doing this to know that things usually don't go to plan, whether you're an indie or AAA.
yep, it is pretty inevitable. Wherever you are, wherever you go,
Yeah.
things just take longer than you expect.
And I have one question. Did you know what kind of game you wanted to make when you left? Did you have an idea of what your game direction was?
I had an idea about the particle thing. So for those that don't know, Particle Hearts is the game we released, and aesthetically it looks like a bunch of particles. It kind of has this pointillism style, and that idea was kind of birthed when I was working with the particle effects team, and that team was always trying to push as many particles on screen as they could. Um, and if you have worked in AAA, you know that every team kind of has a budget, and what they're putting on screen can only take so many milliseconds, and if it's above that, then they need to make some cuts because other departments also need valuable milliseconds to be able to do what they're trying to do. Um, and so there was always this kind of this constant kind of struggle to put as many particles on screen as they could, but balance that within the budgets that they had. And at one point I was just thinking, well, what if your whole budget was just particles? Like, what could you do with that? How could you make that look? Would that be interesting? And so that was kind of that was where the idea started. And so when I was designing Particle Hearts, at least in the early days of trying to come up with the art style, I spent a lot of time just exploring that idea and just running with that. And it proved to be more difficult than I thought. Um, in some ways, the idea of making everything out of particles was a design decision based around the limitation that I knew I wasn't going to be able to create an art style that was realistic,
Right.
because I know how much time that takes. If you have realistic looking characters, then you have to have realistic looking hair, and you have to have realistic looking animations, and there's this ripple effect that happens, that you can't have one thing look realistic and then some other thing look toony or cartoony
Right. Yeah, the
or
whole
low res or whatever.
yeah.
Everything kind of has to be raised to that level. And so I knew I couldn't do that, but I thought, you know what, I can make a game out of particles that looks kind of point that uses kind of a pointillism style that seems doable for one artist. Um, and I do believe that games are fundamentally that they're designed around limitations, and they exist because of limitations. And I think some of the best ideas come out of those limitations. So for me, particles was an answer to the question of how do I make a game with one artist that's also visually compelling. And that's where I landed, and I'm happy with where it landed visually, and people seem to be reacting really well to it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I'm glad
was
I'm
Go ahead,
glad
sorry.
that choice paid off for people.
I have to admit I was really intrigued when I first saw the trailer. I'm a big thing I really enjoy about our channel is that we try to explore different titles,
Hmm.
while other people
Hmm.
focus on like the biggest, best new, thing in the industry, even for
Sure.
indies. It's like I see a game and I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks so unique, and I want to play it because I really
Hmm.
love. I get very bored easily, so I get bored of playing the
Sure.
same simulation game, the same RPG, et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera. So I like new. And I was
I
a
I'm
little concerned before playing it because I was like, I wonder how this is going to look visually in game. Is it going to be too much? But it was actually
Mhm.
shockingly well blended.
Well, thank
I
you.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on the board thing. I love playing a variety of games. I'm not the guy who likes to get good at any particular game. So
Yeah.
as much as I've worked on Call of Duty in the past, I'm terrible at Call of Duty because I don't have the energy to get good at it.
To keep up.
Um, I
Yeah. No, I
yeah,
get
I
it.
would rather play a new indie title that does one thing different that I've never seen before. Even if I don't like the game, I like to see those new ideas and support those new ideas,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
because at some point maybe those ideas do get picked up by AAA, or catch on, or whatever. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you on that.
I wish some AAAs would take on some because there have been some mechanics in indie games that I'm like, if an indie developer can do this, why can't AAA do this? This just seems
Yeah,
like it makes
yeah.
sense.
I kind of think that's the goal of indies in some ways, is
Yeah.
just to keep,
Trying something
inserting your
new.
ideas into the industry. Just keep throwing stuff out there. Just keep, yeah, like you said, keep trying new things, because eventually something will stick. And that's not to say that like indies only need to have ideas so that AAA will adopt those ideas. That I mean, that's not my belief at all. But um, I think that good ideas are good ideas, regardless if they're in a big AAA package or if they're in a small indie package.
Right.
So
Yeah, exactly.
um, there's fun to be had at all levels, I think, and I think indies have the freedom and can move quicker than AAA in a lot of ways. Um, and so yeah, exploring new ideas is just it's a cool space to be in as an indie for sure.
Right. And this kind of leads, especially with indies, you do have a lot of that playground. So you have that time to trial and error. Did you feel like that time really helped spark some creativity in you? Did it spark new, fresh ideas rather than being like, I have to stay in my lane or I have to do, what I'm asked? Is there a sort of sense of freedom and fun about being able to just run with it and trial and error and see what did work and what didn't?
Yeah, I don't think any indie starts a game because they want to stay in their lane.
Yeah.
I think every indie goes, I don't want to be in this lane anymore. I'm going to do my own thing. Um, and so, yeah, there is something hugely just liberating about being able to do what you want, for better, for worse, right? Um, and I found that the amount of time that you have during the day, uh, leaving AAA, where you do have, you inevitably have a bunch of meetings, and you have a team that you need to manage, and paperwork that needs to be done. You have all this kind of stuff that's not game related,
Right.
that needs to be done. And when you take all of that away, you're left with a 8-hour day that is entirely your own. And that was a weird feeling. It might not sound like it would be weird, but it was really weird. Sitting at my computer going, I have 8 hours and I can literally do whatever I want.
You have
And
to be your own time manager.
yeah, and 8 hours is a long time when it's not filled with stuff. So yeah, you can do a lot, and you can explore a lot of things very quickly in a day, because your time has just kind of been freed up that much. Um, so early days in developing Particle Hearts was spending a lot of time just doing that, just thinking about um, particles, being inspired by particles, watching how other games use particles, and really just what was cool was when I finally decided that okay, particles is definitely the aesthetic that I'm going for. um, it was cool when that aesthetic started to influence the game mechanics. Um, because I think games are the best when their visuals match their mechanics.
Yeah,
They are
absolutely.
not two separate things, right? They both are feeding into one another, and they're both equally as important. So for me, this idea that the world was made out of particles was one thing, right? Aesthetically cool, it looks nice, but how does that affect gameplay? And so you start thinking about how would a character that's made of particles, how would they move? How would they solve puzzles? Um, how do they jump? How do they fight? Um, you know, what abilities would a particle-based character have? Um, because it's easy to take like, well, he can swing a sword or he can shoot a gun, but I think it's far more interesting when that character does something that is based on the visuals. And so that was a really kind of exciting time during the project to explore and to think about. Um, and it kind of became the guiding light of the project, where inevitably you have to make decisions that require you to cut something or to change something. And the guiding light was always, does this support the idea of particles? And if it doesn't, then maybe it doesn't have a place in the game. Um,
I'm curious, is there anything that you tried and thought would work, but like ultimately just ended up being a total flop?
hmm. Total flop. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. Off the top of my head,
It's good that you can't think of anything immediately. It must mean that it wasn't such an extreme flop
it
that
wasn't. Yeah, wasn't the worst idea in the world then. If I can't think of one.
right.
Um, you know, most things, um, most things I thought through pretty thoroughly at the near the beginning of the project. And for me, a lot of that early days process is really just trying to think through how all these mechanics fit together, how they feed off of one another, how they support the idea of particles, um, and really just trying to mentalize the game in your head and be able to play through the game in your head before even creating anything. Um, and I think that ultimately helps when it comes to um, feature creep or having to cut features. If you have a really good sense of what you want to make early, I think that helps. And so um, most people that know me know that maybe an overthinker. So I probably scrutinized and overanalyzed and thought about a lot of these major decisions pretty early on. I made the cuts early in the process.
Right.
So there was a bad idea, which I'm sure there were plenty, right? Because I'm not just filled with great ideas. Um, they were probably cut pretty early in the process, long enough ago where I can't remember one.
Right.
Um,
Well, this kind of
so maybe that's a good
segues.
thing, maybe that's a bad thing.
Yeah. Probably a good thing. I still hold the belief that if there was nothing so intense you can't remember it, it was probably just like an idea you might have had that was
Hmm.
like, well, no, that didn't really work out. So
Yeah,
I
I'll keep
will.
thinking on it, and if one comes to mind, I will let you know.
Perfect. Sounds good. It's kind of a good segue though, because I'm curious if you can like put yourself in the shoes of when you hadn't worked at a gaming industry, like comparing indie developers that have never worked for a AAA. So you can put yourself in the shoes of I haven't worked in AAA yet. I have an education,
Hmm.
I've done stuff, but haven't been there. Do you
Hmm.
think that having spent so long working for a company and team that really helped define that precise decision making and thorough planning and learning to cut things early and that just that
Hmm.
whole process?
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that you have to work in AAA to understand how to make a video game. I don't think that that's necessarily true, but I also won't sit here and say that it didn't help either. Um,
Right.
I learned a lot from working in AAA, and uh, I think some of my big takeaways, um, knowing kind of knowing what each development phase looks like and what is accomplished in each of those phases. So for us, we had kind of this research phase where it was just, hey, we're starting the next game. Let's do some research. Let's figure out what tools we want to work with. How do we make our pipelines better or faster? Um, what kind of mechanics do you want to explore? Just kind of this you're just trying to be a sponge, right?
Right.
And then there's kind of this ideation phase where there's no bad ideas, and we're throwing a bunch of ideas at the wall and seeing if anything sticks, and maybe we test out a couple of those ideas to see if they're actually as fun as we think they are. Um, so there's that kind of ideation phase. And then we've got the block out phase where you're starting to kind of implement and just block out some of these ideas. Alpha, beta, polish phase. There's these phases of development that, when you're familiar with them, I think it makes the indie process easier because you know what to expect in each of those phases and the goal of each of those phases, because every game follows those same kind of phases. There's no game that jumps from the ideation phase to beta, right? It's you have to work your way through all these phases to get to the end, and so that definitely helped. I think being in AAA, um, knowing how to hit deadlines was really important.
Right. Yeah.
Call of Duty was coming out every November, whether you liked it or not, and
Yep.
and that meant that the team had to be done a couple months before the game was released, and so hitting deadlines was super important. um, we had this kind of internal saying near the end there, when you're in kind of this polish phase. You can either, when you're dealing with bugs anyway, you can either fix it, you can hide it, or you can cut it. Those are your three options.
Yeah.
And knowing which one of those to do and when to do those things is tricky. And I think it, like anything else, it takes practice, and it takes going through that process of having to cut something that you love and that you've worked on, but knowing that it's the right decision and it's the right time to cut that thing. I struggled with that, and I still struggle with that. Knowing when to let a thing go,
Right.
is tough to do. But inevitably, with the schedule that we had, you had to make those decisions. And as a lead, I had to make those decisions for my team, and those decisions aren't easy and they don't come lightly, but they're necessary if you want to hit a deadline. So
Yeah.
that was kind of another thing that AAA was good at, kind of teaching me how to look at. Being able to analyze like every decision that you make. I remember I was in college, and I was taking this woodworking class, and I wasn't big into woodworking, right? I wanted to be at a computer, but I remember something my professor said one time. He said, there will come a day when every decision, you'll know why you've made every decision that you did. And that idea was really bizarre to me at the time, because I feel like I was just kind of making art and letting it kind of happen, and just uh, letting it flow. And I wasn't making conscious decisions about everything that I was doing. I was more reactionary in some way. Um, and there came a point years and years later, where I understood. I was making decisions um, for every. I knew why I was making the decisions I was making for everything that went into the game, um, and I think when you get that to that point, you're not only thinking about yourself, but you're thinking about the people that are surrounded by you too.
Right. It affects
Um,
so many.
right. You know, a decision that might be best for me and my team isn't always the best decision for the team at large. And so being able to really analyze and understand the ripple effects and to see the big picture in your decisions was an important thing to have on a big team. Um, Probably less important on an indie team, uh, because if I make a dumb decision, I'm the one that's going to suffer the consequence for that.
Right.
Um, but I've tried to keep that mentality as I transition to indie, in hopes that it will help the process. Um,
It's curious though. I wonder with indies, since you didn't have a deadline, did you set internal deadlines for yourself where you were like, okay, I'm going to
mhm.
give myself X amount of time to work on this bug, or I'll just figure out a way to cut it?
Absolutely, yep. Um, I I don't think I could have done it without a timeline or deadlines.
Right.
Um, as artists, I just think the task will expand to the allotted time,
Oh, yeah.
and so I had to be very conscious about how much time I was spending on a certain thing and how important that thing was. And so just because I wanted it to look great didn't mean I I had the time or the the people or the money to make it look great.
Right.
And you have to pick and choose your battles. Um, and there are definitely things in indie where you just go, you know what, this is good enough, and it kills you a little bit each time that you have to make that choice. Um,
Yep.
but if we didn't make those choices, our games would take a decade to make, and then you're looking at a situation where it's not a profitable business model anymore.
Right. Yeah, no.
Um, so you're in my mind, it's balancing the business side of things with your artistic desire to make everything look amazing,
Right.
and those two things are going to be at odds with one another more often than not. And it's just trying to find the right balance there so that you're not spending a month on a feature that nobody cares about.
Yeah,
um,
don't drive yourself insane with the little tiny details that only you are going to notice.
yes, because I'm sure you've been there, right? You've worked
Yes,
on something for so
absolutely.
long and you're really proud of a thing, and then you show it to somebody and they go, oh, I like the shoelaces. And like,
Oh, every
I didn't
time.
work, like, I don't care about the shoelaces. Like,
Yep.
didn't you see how the eye movement like looks at that certain point? It took me so long to get that down, and they just don't care, right?
Right.
It goes over their head. um I'm still probably not the best at identifying, what is the thing that a player
What's
will
useless
that
and
will
what's not.
really
Yeah.
resonate. Yeah, I think you just kind of, hopefully you get better with it over time. um but yeah, it's being able to identify those things that will matter ultimately, and trying to invest most of your time and your energy there,
Right.
because at the end of the day, you're never going to look like a AAA game. It's never going to be as polished, it's
Yeah,
never
you
going to
just
be as
don't have the
pretty.
manpower.
Yep. I'm playing Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I'm looking at these vistas going, these are beautiful,
Yeah.
these are amazing, like this, like the way the
Yep.
fog is rolling through and the leaves are getting pushed around, it's like, this is awesome. And um, we used to kind of have this saying where we would say, we can do anything, but we can't do everything.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you want us to make the leaves look awesome blowing off of trees, great, we can do that. But that might mean we need to cut something else.
Right.
That might mean another feature gets less attention. Um, so yeah, at the end of the day, it's really just picking your battles.
Well, and it almost sounds like your time at AAA, it's not necessarily working in AAA, it's just the practice that you get sounds more invaluable than anything. So I imagine if, if you're an indie dev that hasn't worked in it, by the third game that you
Mhm.
make, you're probably way more experienced and you're better at balancing
Mhm.
project timelines. And so
Yep.
it's just the
Which
difference
is what.
between whether you're getting paid by a AAA company, which is ideal, or, trying to fork it on your own.
Mhm. Yeah, which is
But
why, and this is nothing. I'm not saying anything new here. Which is why a lot of people will tell you if you're making an indie game for the first time, start small. Start with a
yep,
small idea,
yep.
and get through the entire process, because
Do the
that
pipeline
is,
once.
yes, that is so valuable. Um, because even I'd never been through that whole process before, where I was responsible for making a game with a 3-person team, right?
Yeah.
That is entirely different than making a game with a 300-person team. And so there were many parts of the process of the pipeline that I have never kind of had to think about. Um, and that includes kind of the business side of things too. Like AAA didn't prepare me at all for
Right. Yeah, I
setting
imagine
up
not.
for setting up an LLC, or trying to get a publisher, or trying to launch a game, doing the marketing for a game. Like I never had to think about any of that. There were dedicated teams for that. So
I'm curious what your we always joke about turning to Google, but what was
mhm,
your learning process for how do I get a publisher? How do I get this launched? I imagine putting a
sure.
game up on Steam was new territory too. So
Yeah. Honestly, there's a lot of YouTubing, there's a lot of Googling.
yeah.
I mean, there is so much stuff that you don't know, and there's always going to be stuff uh, that you don't know. So for me, it was it was really just about trying to be, at first it's just trying to be a sponge, because you don't even know what to think. You don't even know how to tackle things, because you just don't know enough about um, what you're trying to do yet to even know. So
Right.
if we just take the business side of things, for example, I had never started a studio before. I'd never started my own company. I've never worked for myself. I've never done any of the things needed to actually start a business, a legitimate legal business, right? And so I just start with podcasts, like this one, and many others. There are video game podcasts dedicated to just the business side of
Right.
indie games. Start there, and you just start to listen, and you don't even know what you're listening for at first. Um,
yeah.
but if you listen enough, you'll start to pick out things that everybody kind of keeps saying, and then over time you think, okay, I've heard this a few times now. It must be important. So let me look into that a little bit more. Um, Watching a bunch of YouTube videos, reading a bunch of articles. I'd say read books, but I'm not a reader, so I'd be hypocritical if I said read books.
yeah, I feel that.
But read books if that's your thing. Like, read books.
Is there a point that you felt like overwhelmed and scared, like you made the wrong decision, or did you feel
Oh
pretty
God,
gung ho?
all the time, all the time. Yeah, you're never. Um, one of the things that this process has taught me in general is being comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're never going to bed at night going, I know exactly what I need to do tomorrow,
yeah.
right? There is always questions. There are always unknowns, and there are unknowns that are going to happen tomorrow, and there are unknowns that are going to happen 6 months from now, and 2 years from now, and you'll go crazy, if you let yourself kind of go down that rabbit hole, um, of unknowns, because there's too many to think about. So I found that, And it was actually, this was difficult for me because, like I said earlier, I like to think about things. I like to overanalyze. I like to have a plan about what I'm going to do. And in many ways, I couldn't do that. I couldn't write down step 1 through 100
Right.
to go from here's my idea for the game, and then here's me launching the game. Here's every step I need to do in between. You just can't. Um, so that took time. And in some ways you just kind of you force yourself to shut your brain off, and you say, you know what, that's going to be a problem, yes, but I can't fix that problem today, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Right.
Uh,
Yep. Mental
and that's
training.
something I have to remind myself and tell myself that every single day.
Do
What
you
was the
think
question? I don't even know what question I'm
No,
answering
you
anymore.
answered the question perfectly.
Okay.
Do you think approaching your second game that you feel less uncomfortable about the process, or do you think you're still kind of just as scared because it's, a new game, new idea?
A little both. And so I feel more comfortable having gone through the entire process from start to finish.
Right.
Makes me feel more comfortable because I know what to expect now when it comes to things like localization. I had no idea how the localization process was going to work, how I was going to have to implement that into my game, how many languages I was going to have to support. All the questions
Right.
surrounding localization. Had no idea. Same went for porting the game. So we ported the game to all major consoles. I had never ported a game before and didn't know what that process looked like. Um, but now I've gone through that, and so I'm less worried about those things. But I found that, I guess, as an artist, if you're comfortable with what you're doing, you're probably not taking enough risk, or you're probably doing it wrong. You're
Yeah.
probably not pushing yourself enough. So I I feel like for every thing that I became comfortable with, I filled it in with something that I was not comfortable with. Um,
Smart.
so as an example, I'm not going to give a specific example, but there's some mechanics in the game that I'm thinking about now that I don't know if I can pull off. I don't know how to technically do them. Um, there's not much reference for them that exists in video games currently. So
Intriguing.
I've just filled in that safety gap with something that's not safe anymore. Uh, and I don't know. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I should fill those gaps in with things that I am comfortable with. But uh, maybe it's just not my nature. I don't know. But to answer your question, um, I'm more comfortable with some things. I'm less comfortable about other things, and I think at the end of the day, it's all going to probably average out to be me being equally as uncomfortable as I was for the first game.
Right. That makes perfect sense. I think it's smart to take some risks. I mean, ultimately, in the end, if you decide that it's not the route, then you can always make that decision. But I think
Hmm.
I agree. I think it's a little boring just only doing what you're comfortable with. So I do wish you the
Yeah,
best of luck with those. I hope you can crack the code and do something cool and unique.
thank you. Yeah, so every game is a risk, and um, a lot of it is just how do I mitigate those risks as much as
Yeah.
possible. It's picking and choosing what you want to take risks with. Um, and it feels like when you're first making your game, your first game, everything is a risk,
Right.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your art style is a risk. The programs that you use are a risk. um, the plugins that you decide to support are a risk. Like, do I want my characters to be able to blink or have pupils? I mean, these all sound like really small things, but all of them come with some inherent risk because you haven't done them before.
Right.
You've never had to rig a character that blinks and moves its pupils, and then you've never had to animate that character and then put him into cinematics, and how much time is that one little decision going to make? How valuable is it? How important is it to your players? Do they even care if your character doesn't blink? So it's everything
Yeah.
is a risk, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. However big or small, and for your first game, it's identifying the handful of things that you're willing to take the risk on, and then consciously deciding I'm not willing to take a risk on all of these other things, and being okay with it, and then
Right.
being able to design a game around what you have left, right?
Yeah, it's picking and
A
choosing your
compelling-
battles.
Yep.
Do you think that's kind of ultimately what led you to going with a publisher, is just that unknowing and that uncertainty?
Yeah. So a lot about making this first game was me also learning what I liked to do, what I didn't like to do, what I was crap at doing.
Yeah.
You don't know until you've tried. But as a generalist, I liked the idea of being able to explore and learn about every facet that goes into making an indie game.
Right.
But along the way, you inevitably find that you're not good and you don't like doing certain things. So for me, I dislike marketing.
Understandably.
God bless all the marketers out there. I can't stand it. I was never been a social media person. I had to jump on social media for the first time when I started to make this game,
Right.
and I didn't know anything about it. I was having phone conversations with my buddy, and I'm asking him, what is it? What is a hashtag? I don't understand it. What is that? And so I was starting from kind of square one with all that stuff. And just very quickly found that I don't like spending my time with social media. But it's important, right? You can't just ignore it. So for me, okay, I'm not good at marketing. I'm not a great character animator. I don't do UI very well. I can't write music. I tried my hand at scripting, thinking maybe I could do my own scripting, and that fell apart pretty quickly. My art brain just can't come to terms with thinking like a scripter or a programmer.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, you're identifying the things that you need help with, and then seeking out answers to that, solutions for those things. So in the case of the programmer and the music, I hired a programmer, Christopher Graff, and a composer, Michael Ellery, and they did an amazing job, right? And so they were able to kind of fill in that gap there, where I was weak at. And yeah, so I think that's going to be a process that every new indie developer goes through.
And has to make the ultimate decision. Like, I imagine I'm a little lucky. My husband has a degree in computer science, so I've got a coder sitting right next to me. But that's my thing. I don't know anything about coding. I mean, I can make a few little scripts here and there, but nothing professional. So for me, approaching game development, it's like, I can kind of make these things work inside Unreal, but if something goes wrong, I'm done for.
Right. It's going to be endless Google searches all day trying to figure out what I did wrong.
6 months of learning coding.
Yeah, and ultimately you're not going to enjoy that time spent either.
Right.
And part of this whole thing was I want to enjoy what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. And if programming is not the thing that makes me happy, if marketing is not the thing that makes me happy, that's fine. But I need to find somebody that that knows how to do those things, enjoys those things, is good at those things. Otherwise,
Right.
you're going to end up with a pretty game that controls like crap, you know?
Well, look at how beautiful this is. Too bad I can't walk.
Yeah, too bad. Yeah, walking? No, we don't support walking.
Yeah, this was just a visual simulator. That's all this is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I totally feel that. Well, that's cool. Um, I don't want to take too much of your time because I know we're already pushing the hour, but I am curious if there's one piece of advice for anybody, like even me, my husband and I are like, we want to make our own game in the next few years. Like,
Mhm.
what would be your best and biggest piece of advice?
I I can't put enough emphasis on just being a sponge. Um, I I'm just a believer in um, listening and viewing and reading and doing all these things that just help you understand what you're going to try to create. Um, so for me, like I said, it was podcasts, a lot of YouTube, and these are things I could integrate into my day when I wasn't actually working on the game.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, free time.
Right. I'm working out and I'm listening to podcasts. And I might not understand everything that they're talking about, but over time, if I listen to enough of those podcasts, I'm gonna understand more than I did a month before.
Right.
Same with YouTube videos. Some of this stuff can be fun too. I mean, I play games that are in the genre that you're interested in, um, and and be analytical of those games. Why are
Yeah.
they
What
making
do
the
you
choices that
enjoy?
they're making?
Yeah.
What do you like about them? What don't you like about them? Because as I mentioned earlier, there's probably a reason why they're doing every single thing in that game. Now, those choices might not ultimately work. They might be wrong choices, but I guarantee you they're making choices for a reason. And the
Right.
more you can understand about why they're making those choices, I think the better off, the better chance you have of making uh, good decisions moving forward. Um, with that comes documentation for me. So I don't have a good memory when it comes to how to do certain things. So if I hear something that I think I will need later, I have to write it down.
Right.
Um, and so a big part of me um, preparing to go indie was learning Unity. That's the game engine that Particle Arts was made in. Um, and just documenting everything that I was doing, so that when I had to come back to it and I had to start making particle effects for the first time, I had documentation about how to do that because
Right.
I knew myself and I knew that I would forget. And honestly, if anybody can remember everything about Unity, then they're brilliant. But I actually don't think that
Photographic.
that person exists, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have a photographic memory, then great. Like don't take documentation. That's fine. But
Right.
for everybody else, I would suggest having good documentation that speaks to you in a way that you can understand a year later. Because some of these things, you're not gonna maybe you're not even gonna work on localization or UI for the first year. Uh,
Right.
but there will come a time when you're gonna have to start making UI, and rather than having to learn it in the moment, if you can learn it ahead of time, document it, you have something to come back to then. Um,
It's just really
and
having a
then,
willingness to learn and keep notes.
yeah, it sounds stupid, but it sounds simple. But for me, that stuff has been invaluable. Um, and then I think lastly, I'll just pick something that you're passionate about, because game development is so hard that you'll be working on this thing and dedicating a lot of your time and energy to it. And if you're not in love with the idea, I think it's going to make it that much harder to cross the finish line.
Right.
Um,
It's no fun working on
yeah,
something and finishing something you hate.
right down the home stretch of any project that I've ever worked on, it is not easy. Like that last stretch is always the most difficult because you're tired, you're probably overworked at that point. Um,
You're probably
you've
really
been
sick of looking at your own work.
you've been looking at particles. Yeah, you've been looking
Yeah.
at particles for 3 years, and you're like, I hate particles. They're the worst, right? Like,
Yeah.
so nothing is working in your favor down the home stretch, and so if you love the thing that you're working on, that's just it's going to help. So I like to tell people, don't follow trends or chase trends unless that trend is something that you're actually really interested in. Then fine,
Right.
do the trend. Trends are popular for a reason, so I'm not going to say all trends are bad, because great things come out of trends. But if that trend isn't your thing, then don't chase it.
Yeah. Don't chase a trend just to chase. You have to really be passionate about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you
Yep.
think you'll ever do particles again?
I would, I think it's a cool art style, and I think there's a lot of unexplored ideas there, things that were left on the cutting room floor, or things that I felt like I could try to do better next time, or push more next time. I would love to come back to particles one day. It's almost a shame if I didn't, right?
Right.
Not that, okay, I don't want to get hate for, I'm not trying to compare myself to Picasso here for a second, but but if like Picasso changed his art style every single time he did a painting, he
Right.
wouldn't have a body of work. He wouldn't have been able to kind of explore the style that he kind of developed. And so there is a part of me that kind of wants to see what Particle Hearts 2.0 could look like. How much better could it be visually? What things could I explore that are different? But at this moment in time, I don't know. I haven't made that decision yet. So
Well, there you go.
I guess time will tell. Time will tell. Follow me on social media to find
there you
out.
go. Yes. Yeah, if you want to know if Jess goes and does more particles, just make sure you follow him.
Yep.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate the time. I was definitely thoroughly enjoying the way the game plays, and the particle effects were extremely unique and very cool. And
Thank you.
just kind of the way the story visually tells itself too, and then the little puzzle round, like it was kind of a delight. So I definitely am excited to see your next project, and selfishly hope one day you revisit it, because it was well done. But also
Thank you.
Making another one right after making one, I could see how that would be a little tedious as well. So probably best
Sure.
to explore something new first.
We'll see. I'm not trying to set anything in stone at the moment.
Right.
I like to just I like to spend this time just thinking that anything is possible. Anything is possible. No idea is wrong. Let's just start being a sponge again, right? And just absorbing a bunch of entertainment, and
Absolutely.
going outside. Like let's go outside and get some sun and see what's out there for a little while, instead of sitting in front of the computer.
Yeah, in the dark room for 12 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, inspiration comes from everywhere, and I think the more experiences that you can have, the more likely you are to have a unique idea that you can incorporate into a game. So
Absolutely.
maybe that's my last word of advice. Go outside, kids, and get some
Go
sunlight.
touch grass.
Go touch grass. Yeah.
as they say in the gaming realm. Yes.
Yep.
But well, that's very cool. I appreciate you taking the time. You'll have to let us know when your next project is obviously closer to fruition, obviously. But
Absolutely.
I'm excited.
And thank you for taking the time and putting a spotlight on smaller indie games. I love indie games. I really do think that they have a place, and that they have a purpose, and they are pushing envelopes and the medium in cool, new, exciting directions. And it's hard for indies to get the spotlight on them, And so anything that helps do that, I think is meaningful and important. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I kind of feel like an indie developer myself, admittedly. There were a lot of times
Hmm.
as a creator, I would apply for keys or be like, I really want to review your game. I'm putting hard work
Hmm.
into these videos and you get so many no's. And then it's
Hmm.
those one-off wonderful indie teams that, give you the chance. And every time
Hmm.
you put out a video, your channel grows just a little more and just a little more. So
Yeah.
we've put a
Yep.
focus, even as we grow, is like I just refuse to stop featuring indies because there's just so much of a story to tell and there's so much human. Even
Yeah.
I love my AAA games. I will
Me too.
always
I will
play an
always.
Assassin's Creed, but I
Yep.
just when I see a unique indie, I'm like, I have to play it.
We're in it together. We're in
Yeah,
it together.
exactly. So, well, thank you. I don't want to take any more of your time, but I will keep doing what we do, and I'm definitely excited to see where your future leads you.